So I told Bergen I use the same pricing for my pavers as I do for my artificial turf, and he asked that question. Our paver pricing typically ranges between 35 and 45 a square foot. That might seem high at first, but let's sit down and we'll dive into it. I know what you're thinking. Some of you guys are like, he doesn't get that much for pavers. I do, 100% every time. But you got to understand, I'm not going to work if they're not going to pay me what it costs to do the job. I've just done too many. Pavers are probably one of the least profitable things that we do. With that said, here's how I do it. So this is a document I made actually when I was hurt, threw my back out, couldn't walk for like 2 years, not without being in pain anyways. And so I started creating these manuals so somebody could go out and do what I did. And this was how to bid a paver patio installation. And it starts out with just some questions for the customer. First thing we need to know is, where does the customer want the patio or the pathway installed? We need to know, do they want natural rock? Do they want concrete pavers? I don't necessarily need to know what paver they want. That's going to be something I recommend, but I do need to know what style they want. So they want them aged, they want it to look new, natural rock, concrete paver. And then I also like to know if there's any private utilities that are going to be potentially running through the customer's desired location, irrigation system, a shed or outbuilding has power, maybe there's a hose spigot or some kind of lighting wires out there. I guess I figured it's common sense, so I didn't include it in here yet, but we should probably also be asking the customer like why they want the patio, what are they going to use it for, that kind of thing. But then I moved on to the bidding process. This is not a refined document. It was something I drew up roughly and was going to edit in the future, and never really got around to the editing part. In fact, I don't even know that I was certified when I made this. So as I come across the mistakes, I'll make sure I point them out for you guys. But anyways, I get into the bidding process next, and basically I want to know, how many square feet will the patio be? How many feet of patio perimeter will be exposed to a non-permanent surface? So basically, how much edging am I going to need? You know what I mean? And then I want to know, is the patio on flat ground? Basically, I want to get the slope of the patio area, and you can do that with basically just rebar string and the string level if you don't have a laser with you. But measuring that grade is going to basically give you the height of your wall. And since you've already measured the perimeter of your patio, now you have the length of your wall. And from that, you can basically put a wall estimate together. I have a whole nother manual on how to bid a retaining wall. And so I actually tell the estimator at that point to refer to that manual and basically treat it as a separate item. But to finish off this page, we're basically going to find the quantity of excavation necessary, and then put a price to the excavation, and we're going to also figure out how much sediment barrier fabric we're going to need for this patio. Now, before I jump to the next page, I do want to say, if you actually read the details here, my how to excavate is completely wrong. I based that off of coverage calculations for topsoil from what we used to get from our suppliers, what they told us, a yard of topsoil would cover, and I figured backwards, and it didn't really math out. I was able to get a consistent number from it, and I was able to get an accurate rate, but when I was giving the customer the excavation quantities, it wasn't accurate. So I just changed my rate and changed the way I do that. I just use an online calculator now to figure my excavation quantities. You get your length, your width, and your depth, and you can put it into an online calculator, and they'll tell you how many cubic yards you got to excavate. Excavation rate is going to be one of those things that changes your price pretty drastically, and depending on your area, excavation could be really easy or excavation could be a mother. So that might be why my patios cost more than other people's. So now that you've got your patio size, you've got the perimeter length, if there needs the retaining wall, and you've got that separately bid. You've also got your quantities of excavation and the rates for those. You know how much sediment barrier fabric you've got to put down because you've got the square footage of your patio and the excavation, area basically. And then you're going to start needing to figure out how much base material do you got to bring back in. And so I come up with a formula to pretty much create, this is how much base material we need, add a rate to that, which nowadays we actually use 3 different base materials. And then we go and we price out the paver plus the installation of that paver. Then we're going to add in the price of our edging restraint. We'll add in our quantity and price for polymeric sand. We will add in the amount of topsoil and backfill necessary, and that includes for repairing your access point. as well as figuring out seed and straw, or usually it's sod on those kinds of jobs. But anyways, so that's obviously not super practical to use out in the field. So what I actually have is in my notepad on my phone, I have saved a bunch of samples of, the wording of different types of projects. And you can see it's basically a general guideline. It's already pre-written out for me. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this and I'm going to basically copy paste it and start editing from here. But this is kind of gives me the same reminders as that sheet in a shorthand form. And this one's actually even better because it's the one I use on a daily basis. So but it doesn't have any explanation with it, right? So on its own, it doesn't do a whole lot for you. But once you understand the how-to part, then this makes it where you can pump out paver bids really pretty fast. So this does remind me for demo, which is a big part of the patio project and definitely adds into the cost per square foot, as does the repair of the turf and the reinstallation of the landscaping, which a lot of hardscape companies may not do. They just build a patio and then leave the yard and the landscape trashed. But basically, we're going to remove and dispose of whatever existing structures or landscaping is there in the way of what we're trying to build. And then we're going to install our patio, and that's going to require an excavation. So we're going to have excavate so many yards of dirt, then we're going to either spread that to backfill where we need to fill, or haul it away and dispose of it. Then we're going to install a sediment barrier fabric. Then we're going to bring in our base materials, our pavers, our edging restraint, our poly sand, and then our topsoil and whatever we're doing to repair the turf, seed and straw or sod. But yeah, that's how we do it. And when you price each task, each cost driving factor individually, I think you'll find that that's where everybody probably needs to be to make money on pavers, is 35 to 45 a square foot. Unless, of course, they just have a really easy soil to dig in, or maybe a really shallow frost line. And maybe they're not going to repair the turf at the end, or they're not going to put the landscaping back, and maybe there's no demo to do, and maybe the site's got great access and there's no concern of damaging an irrigation system or septic laterals or something like that, and you can just drive right up to the site and just dump right there. You don't have to cart any material across a yard. I mean, all that stuff is obviously going to impact your rates a little bit, but in general, if you know what the cost driving factors are, you can adjust the rates that relate to those factors and get a pretty accurate price. So if you've stuck with me this long, I'm just gonna go ahead and recap for you one more time. First, we're gonna charge for the demo. Then we're gonna charge for the excavation. Then we're gonna charge for the base material. Then we're gonna charge for the pavers. Then we're gonna charge for the paver edging restraint. And then we're gonna charge for the poly sand. And then we're gonna charge for whatever has to be done to fix it all and put it all back together. And that's where I'm coming up with my price. And I'll be honest, I haven't really checked what my price per square footage is on my last several paver jobs. I'm sure everything's gone up. We may even be as high as 50, 55 a square foot on some of these jobs now. But obviously you can go as crazy as you want with landscaping. So you can't get too hung up on the high end of the pavers. I think the important thing is to say, hey, at minimum, I'm able to do it for about 35 bucks a square foot if you want to go bare bones basic. But yeah, if you're not thinking of all those factors that cost you money as the contractor that the customer should be paying you for, then you're leaving a lot on the table. And I think a lot of guys just say, oh, it's going to be 35 a square foot, and then they're happy with that. And that doesn't account for all those factors and the variances that can be within each factor. So that's what I try to do, and I think that's the best way to do it. And when you look at changing that into an artificial turf, all you're doing is swapping out pavers with artificial turf, and instead of edging restraint, you're using artificial turf stakes. And instead of polysand, you're using the rubber fill stuff that goes in between the turf plates. So it's really the same exact process. Otherwise, that's why I'm using those as comparison points and saying I charge about the same or pretty much the same. I used my same calculator and my same formula to come up with my paver pricing as I do my artificial turf pricing.